Right after Manafort wiretaps were revealed, Susan Rice went on TV and did most desperate thing imaginable. When someone is guilty, you can almost guarantee the first thing they are going to do is attack the person accusing them. Now let's talk about Susan Rice and the wiretaps of Paul Manafort during the 2016 election campaigns. It was revealed that Rice did, in fact, wiretap the Trump campaign, despite telling the American people she didn't. Not only that, she apparently used a secret FISA order to do it that not even the Director of National Security, James Clapper, knew about, which I doubt. So, how did Rice respond to all these bombshell revelations that could end with this being hers and Obama's Watergate? She decided to go on TV and use the time to insult Trump. Isn't that what they always do? Blame the other person? Rice talked about how bombastic his speech was and how she would not have been so mean to North Korea. Of course, she was really upset by Trump's insult of Iran since she negotiated the terrible Iran nuclear deal. This is a classic deflection from a woman who knows that her goose is cooked. There is no running from the fact that she wiretapped a political campaign for the opposite side in secret and then lied about it to the public afterward. Should Susan Rice continue to walk around a free woman, or is it time to put her behind bars? It's time to put her behind bars. It's time to put Obama behind bars because she could not have done this on her own. And it's time to put Hillary Clinton, the main culprit in all of this, behind bars. If I was Trump, that's the first thing I would start working on.
Joining me now is Susan Rice, the former National Security Advisor in the Obama White House, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations as well.
Nice to be with you.
Well, good to be with you. You heard Nikki Haley say that the entire world was supportive of the president's speech. That's not what we heard from President Macron and some others. What is your take? Obviously, you've been critical of the Trump administration.
Well, let me begin with something less critical and give the president and Ambassador Haley credit for arriving at the United Nations and underscoring that it isn't an organization that has potential. It's one that we ought to work with, and the initiatives that they have pushed on UN reform are quite consistent with those.
You see, the UN reform, the consistency, like she's praising the UN. And we know the UN is not a good thing to have in our country.
There was prior administrations in place, proper priority on that. The speech, however, I think was a problem.
Really?
It was internally inconsistent. It was full of bombast and threats.
Inconsistent speech? Who's inconsistent?
It was a major divergence from decades of U.S. foreign policy where the United States has recognized that we don't, in fact, live in a zero-sum world. We live in a world where our security and prosperity is enhanced when others are. And so the threats delivered towards North Korea came across, I think, to many in the international community as well as in the United States as being inappropriate and over the top for an American president, and more importantly, counterproductive. We have a serious problem in North Korea. We have for many years, and that problem is getting worse. The question is, what do we do about it? And the president threatening to destroy a nation from the podium of the United Nations is probably not the best way to approach it.
And they were always paying North Korea off and kicking the can down the road for years.
There has been a lot of support in conservative circles, the political base, for both a strong criticism of North Korea and, of course, of Iran, and the president now threatening to get out of the Iran nuclear deal. North Korea first, calling him Rocket Man and threatening to destroy the country. Is that appropriate given the fact that he has use such rhetorical access Kim Jong-un is against the United States.
Well, I don't think it's ideal or appropriate for the President of the United States to stoop to the same level as a 30-year-old murderous dictator in North Korea. What we need to do about this threat is as follows. First of all, we need to shore up our allies and shore up their defenses as well as our own national defenses against missiles and other threats. We need to increase the pressure and the costs on North Korea for its behavior. So that means continuing to ratchet up sanctions. It means leaving the door open to diplomacy. But it also means realizing that the way we may have to deal with this threat, given how it has progressed, is through traditional but very firm and clear deterrence. Making clear to North Korea that were it to attack the United States, our territories such as Guam, or our allies such as South Korea and Japan, that indeed the regime would be annihilated by the United States. Making that declarative policy clear draws a line that we need to draw. Also, if they were to proliferate nuclear weapons or missile technology. But we need to do that in a sober, consistent, coherent way. And I think what happened yesterday and has happened in the past is that the rhetoric has been overheated, the lines have been blurred, and by mocking Kim Jong-un as Rocket Man, we actually degrade the seriousness and the gravity of our own deterrent message.
Secretary Tillerson has made it clear that talks are a possibility if they stop testing. Should that be the precondition, or should we go immediately into talks, and including talks directly with North Korea?
I don't think that we should set preconditions for talks. We need to make clear that they must denuclearize. That would be the goal of talks. But I think we found when we've set all kinds of preconditions that it's very difficult to get anywhere. I think for the moment, quite frankly, it is difficult to get anywhere. I don't think the North Koreans are yet ready to come to the table. But we have to leave the door open to that, and we shouldn't put so many hurdles in the way to make it impossible.
What about getting out of the nuclear deal? There are all kinds of signals yesterday as well as behind the scenes today that he may very well decide to get out of the Iran nuclear deal or not certify their compliance, find some legalistic way to try to get out of it or put them on notice that we are going to get out of it.
Well, Andrea, that would be a massive mistake. Let's remember where we began with the Iran nuclear deal. Some years ago, the biggest threat that we perceived from Iran, the biggest threat that Israel and our allies in the Gulf perceived from Iran was that it had the potential to acquire and deliver a nuclear weapon. We have taken that potential off the table. Iran has had multiple pathways to a nuclear weapon. It now has none. It has the most intrusive inspection regime ever implemented. Iran is not in a position to obtain a nuclear weapon, which is hugely important to our security and that of our partners in the region. It does continue to engage in behavior that we find hugely objectionable, from support for terrorism to destabilizing countries in the neighborhood. We need to continue to work to counter that, as well as their missile threat. But all those threats and challenges would be far worse if Iran were in a position to obtain a nuclear weapon. So having solved that problem for the time being and for the foreseeable future, we would be foolish to walk away from a deal that has accomplished a major security objective and realize that if we were to do so, we would be leaving ourselves isolated, not Iran. It would be us breaking the deal, leaving us isolated from our allies who helped negotiate it, like Germany, like France and Britain, the European Union, and from the other partners, Russia and China. That would be folly, and it would leave Iran free to develop a nuclear weapon unimpeded, and it would leave us with no ability to reconstitute the sanctions regime that put so much pressure on them to get them to this deal.
Now, President Rouhani was speaking at the United Nations General Assembly this morning. I wanted to play a little bit of that.
It will be a great pity if this agreement were to be destroyed by rogue newcomers to the world of politics. The world will have lost a great opportunity.
But Iran is also saying that he won't agree to any renegotiation, any changes. Should the deal be open at least to changes or amendments, perhaps not sunsetting? There's a meeting tonight of all of the countries where Rex Tillerson's going to sit down with Foreign Minister Zarif. Should this be on the table?
Reopening the deal is not realistic. It was a good deal. It was a sound deal. It accomplished our objectives, despite what President Trump says.
Yeah.
So there's no need to reopen it. There's value in
$400 million they
discussing how to
shipped.
strengthen implementation, even though it's being fully implemented according to every objective analysis. But we could begin a process of dialogue to discuss what comes after this deal sunsets, or elements of its sunset. And that's worth doing, but we can't do that when we're hurling threats, threatening to walk out, acting like a spoiled child at the dinner table. If we sit down and develop relationships, and I'm glad that Secretary Tillerson will be meeting with Foreign Minister Zarif. That channel that we had when Secretary Kerry spoke frequently with Foreign Minister Zarif was very useful for a variety of issues beyond the nuclear issue. So opening that relationship, having that dialogue, and working with those on our side who helped negotiate the Iran deal to think about what may come afterwards is very useful. But we can only do that effectively in the context of upholding our obligations to stay in the deal so long as Iran is complying, which it is.
Will President Obama be speaking out on this? This is a central part of his diplomatic legacy.
Well, I think President Obama will continue to make his voice heard when he thinks it's necessary.
He's in New York now, as you know.
He's not here to talk about the Iran nuclear deal today. But I do think, Andrea, that, you know...
Why do they still call him President Obama? That's beyond me.
We have a world community that came behind this deal because they saw that it solved and addressed a very significant problem. That we need to stick with, even as we continue to put pressure on Iran for the behavior that we continue to find objectionable. Its missile tests, its support for terrorism, its role in Syria and Yemen.
And we only have a few seconds left, but your take on the State Department diplomacy in the Trump era?
Well, Andrea, the State Department is not an entity to be weakened and undermined and eviscerated, as some might seem to think. It's a huge asset, along with our defense and our development, to project and ensure our strength on the international stage. We need diplomats, so we need people in confirmed positions that can do the business of diplomacy. We don't have that. We need an adequate budget. The President's budget would have cut the State Department by 30%. Fortunately, it seems...
We need a budget? Obama put the budget to $20 trillion almost.
Seems that wiser minds on a bipartisan basis in Congress will rectify that. We need to be active and engaged on the world stage and not in a hunkered down posture. And so I hope that having spent a few days here at the United Nations, that Secretary Tillerson, President Trump, will see the benefits of diplomacy when they engage in it in a sustained fashion and enable the day-to-day diplomats to have the wherewithal to do their jobs on behalf of all of us.
Ambassador Susan Rice, thank you very much.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for
we
watching
don't like
MSNBC
you. Unreal. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And again, thank you so much for watching.